Midnight shift employees of Reddit. What's the creepiest experience you've had during your nighttime shift? Several decades ago I did the night shift at a local corner store in one of the less nice areas of town. Highly dodgy would be generous in describing it. Hilariously, it's now gentrified to the max. One night the glass door slid open and in strode a half-naked, bone-thin dude who was obviously off his tree and high as a kite. I knew that wild look well. I'd seen this guy before on more than one occasion. What made this night unique was the blood-filled syringe he was wielding. Now after a couple of years of solo night shift in that place, I'd been held up several times. Knife, baseball bat, even a gun. Rare in Australia, but that syringe was new and frightening. Other holdups were scary but run-of-the-mill. Hand over the $50, that was all I kept in the till, and they were on their way. This guy, Gavin was his name, didn't know what planet he was from or on while making demands about giving him everything I had. I have never been so scared in my life. Thankfully he sodded off with his $50 and a few packs of smokes. Police picked him up 15 minutes after I called them. They knew him well. Also, found out it was his blood and he was HIV plus as well, have Hep C and a few other things. He got a stint in the fish ward. That is my creepiest life experience by far. Posted this before but I'll post it again. Working night shift in a hospital. The staff toilets were off the ward on a corridor. As you went in there were 2 sinks in front of you, paper towels to the left, 2 cubicles to the right and a storeroom between the sinks and the cubicles. Set back, no door. The light in the storeroom never worked. Both cubicle doors open. I went into the one closest to the door. As soon as I started doing what I needed to do, crying started from the cubicle next to me. Quiet sobbing, not wailing. When I, very rapidly, left the cubicle I was in, the door to the other one was still open and empty. Same ward, but a few months before was the first night I had done on there. It was an old Nightingale ward, so we put chairs at one end so we could see everyone. The other nurse was reading some notes and said, "Footsteps are here again." We both heard footsteps coming from the top of the ward to where we were, then back up to the top. She didn't even look up, just said, "You get used to it." Only work nights for about a month, so I'll get back to you on better ones. But here's what I've got so far. I work in an addiction rehab facility. We had a guy the other night get so angry at the nurse's station because she was taking too long, less than 45 seconds to get his meds, and politely asked him not to scream at 1 AM. That he eventually had to be escorted out by the only male staff on duty that night and our badass clinical supervisor under threat of calling the police on him. He ended up being discharged and dropped with his belongings at the bottom of our driveway. The facility is on a huge hill and told to figure it out from there. Patients have absolutely threatened staff. Haven't had it happen to me personally yet, but my co-worker had a cup of soda thrown at her the other day and was told she'd look good bleeding in his basement. There's a small forest in back of the facility, and problem patients like to sneak off to run around in there. One night, we were missing 3-5 of them and took a golf cart out to search for them. If you've never been on a golf cart in pitch black woods, I don't recommend it. Almost ran over a skunk on that same golf cart. It blended in too well and my co-worker didn't see it until the last minute, at which point she just screamed and pointed. I almost leapt out. Ghostly voice over our walkie-talkies came on and kept repeating "leave" over and over between garbled sounds. Turns out it was a staff member who was too far away to be heard clearly and was trying to tell us a patient wanted to leave. Still spooky, though. Disheveled sea kids playing hide and seek behind the building in the bushes at 3 AM. Enough said. Me and my college friend used to work at a data center of a bank, away from the city. He used to tell me not to go to the loo during night shifts, even though it seemed completely fine to me. He switched to a new job and a few months later so did I. Later on he told me that the security guard showed him a video of the main glass door within our office open and close for no reason. It was a full-length glass door with proper auto-close fittings since it's a secure data center. It wasn't an auto-opening one. I am glad he didn't tell me about it while I was working there. Hey all, CNA who specializes in dementia here. I work in my town's nursing home, part of Trinity Health if anyone is curious. When I first got hired by my nursing home, the aides and nurses on my dementia unit told me creepy stories about strange things that happen. Doors slamming and lights turning on and off. I didn't exactly believe them and I just thought they were entertaining stories until one night. It was my usual 11 PM to 7 AM shift and it was just me and another nurse. I was busy charting on the patients I was taking care of and decided to take a break from staring at the monitor to stare at my phone. At this point it's like 2 AM and my nurse went on break out to her car to take a nap. I was left to ensure the patients were okay. Now understand, none of my patients walk and are all wheelchair bound, so if they need to get out of bed I would help them, and at 2 AM no one is really awake. I go out to the massive dining room to get a ginger ale, and as I was walking back to the nurse's station I heard something fall and of course I said, oh frick, now I gotta go pick that up. As I go to turn around I see something run towards the oven. Out of view. Our dining room is an upside down L shape. Of course, like any sane man would I go, nurse's name, is that you? Is that you? Is that you? No response. If you and I are playing a game you really need to work on your aim, and no crap, the dining room's radio kicks on and starts playing Frank Sinatra's Fly Me to the Moon. I turned off the radio and called my supervisor to see if she was freaking with me. She was busy up on the other unit. A quick head count revealed everyone was in their beds. I don't go into that dining room in the dark now, and I most certainly leave most of the lights on. I was a night shift convenience store worker back in the day. It was my first week on the job. I noticed out the back window 2 guys were sitting in a beat up car parked in the corner. I noticed they were not only wearing ski masks in the summertime, but it looked like one of them was holding a 9mm and loading it. I wasn't sure what to do, but I decided to walk out the back door. As I walked out I stood about 25 feet away from them. One of them saw me. I quickly pulled my old school flip phone out of my pocket and pretended like I was talking to the police. The 2 individuals in ski masks in the car looked at me for a good 20 seconds. Then they drove off. That night another convenience store 5 miles away was robbed. The clerk died that night. That realization would have freaked me the heck out. The casino I work at closes at night now since about a week or so before quarantine began here, and let me say, an empty casino to clean with no one there. It's like that mirror room scene in IT. You hear all the music and sounds, but whenever you find a coworker in the maze of machines it's equally terrifying, and I found a fellow person. But it's really easy to scare each other. The plus side though is that we can clean things faster and just go home now. I used to have to stay until the last movie ended at the movie theater. It was usually just me and maybe a friend would come to hang out for the night. We heard they recently put an alarm on the hatch going to the roof, but if you open and close it before 15 seconds the door pagers won't go off. So in classic teenager fashion we had an urge to get on the roof. We ended up getting on the roof with no issues and were just chilling and looking around. As we are about to head back to the hatch I get a call. It's the movie theater's number, but my friend and I were the only ones there. I answer, and it turns out it's my manager screaming at me asking if I'm on the roof. I hang up and run down to the lobby. There's my manager and 2 cops waiting there for me. I guess when they set the alarm for the office safe area it goes off when you open the roof hatch. It was my birthday that day and the cops basically wished me a happy birthday and left. Never got fired for it, but had my adrenaline pumping. Used to work security in a landfill with my only companion being a dog that lives there. My job was basically to make sure no one sneaks in to take scrap metal. It was an easy laid back job, especially since it was in the middle of nowhere. One night I am doing my rounds when I see the dogs there looking down the road, and I see a guy just walking towards the landfill, and I start walking towards him and notice he looks pretty beat up, like if he got jumped or something. He passes by a tall bush that was in the road and I wait for him to step out, but he never does, so I shine my light towards the bush but nothing. I wait there for about 2 minutes and nothing, so I decide to get close and the dog I mentioned starts following me. We get close and I pull out my baton just in case, and no one is behind the bush, as if this guy just walked and disappeared. I look down the road and don't see anyone. After a few hours the next shift punches in and I tell her that I saw this guy, and she interrupts me and asks if he looked beat up with a red ripped shirt and barefoot. After I confirmed that she described him exactly, even his hair, she told me that the man I saw died a couple years ago walking in that same road and was hit and dragged by a car that was rushing out of the landfill and left his body behind that bush. I didn't believe her since she was a prankster, but it made me think, and I still don't have an explanation on who that guy was or where he went to. We get anomalous calls at night. Nobody knows when they started. Nobody has been able to figure out where they come from. The numbers can't be traced and go nowhere. The calls come and go. Sometimes months pass without receiving one, and sometimes you can get them every night in a week. There are a few types. One sounds like it's a phone left off the hook alongside a highway somewhere in the middle of nowhere. Another almost sounds like it's underwater or it's next to a tub of water. Another sounds like a wind tunnel. It's just a constant blowing sound that sometimes fades out a bit then picks up again. I've left the receiver on for 15 minutes plus and the call never ends unless you hang up. If you listen long enough, you'll feel like you can make out something in the background. Or if you listen long enough there will be something recognizable to solve the mystery. But it's just constant noise. There's nobody there. Why do they call us after all these years? How do they call us if no one is there? I was painting an elevator shaft in an historic building downtown, but due to the fact that the other workers were there during the day to work on the mechanics, I worked alone at night. The entire 4-story building is being painted so the floors are covered in crinkly drape cloth. I'm on the third one night in shaft painting in perfect silence when I hear the unmistakable sound of footsteps crinkling across the 1st-story floor. No one has access to the building but me, and I did not hear the door code buzz to open even if they did. I hold my breath and get out of sight. The activity continues and my mouth is dry as I call my roommate. I realize that for the past month, I've been showing up to the same location alone, at the same time, and I'm a petite woman in a well-lit empty home full of windows facing a darker corner of downtown. This is the serial killer checklist, and those footsteps have reached the uncovered stairs and stopped. I whisper the code to roommate and grab a piece of plywood the carpenters left behind and cram myself into a corner and wait. The next 2 minutes are completely quiet until I hear the buzzing of the door and my roommate loudly announcing his entrance. I run out of my hiding spot and explain everything as I, with renewed confidence, search the 1st floor with my 2-4. All I had time to tell him was come here now plus address. It slowly connects for him and he wisely suggests we don't go looking for whoever might be there and just leave. The next day I show up during the day, cause a paycheck is a paycheck, and mention that I'm more comfortable with this arrangement to the confused mechanic. Then he asks if anything weird happened on the 3rd floor. He laughed when I didn't answer and says that the guys sometimes feel someone tapping on their shoulder but there's no one there. I've never finished a job so quickly. Frick that place. Midnight stocking shift at a small local grocery store. We have a door in the back that is very loud when it swings shut, and me and my partner for that night heard it. Got out our box cutters, just in case. Made peace with whatever gods we believed in. Then went into the room. No one. We both check the cameras still with our box cutters out and no one. No one went to it. No one was on the other side. It was still just us two. That was one the nights we made sure to get our duties done before it was mandatory. I drive semi-trucks at night with multiple trailers. The style I tend to pull is Rocky's one long 50-foot trailer and a 28-foot pup trailer hook behind it. After you get out of the cities on some highways it's just dark, only thing lighting the roads is the moon and stars. Colors in the sky that would make you think you're seeing UFO flying around. Just beautiful nights. I'm on one of these roads with fog settling in and things are getting darker. This is a 2-lane highway. For no reason I move into the left lane. The moment I start to question why I even did that, this car with no lights appears along the white line of the breakdown lane. Just parked there, no lights on, and a few feet in front of the car is a woman in a dress gently blowing in the wind, standing on the line looking like she was ready to step in front of a truck. Been a few years now and of all things I've encountered that image haunts me. A buddy of mine was on a surf trip to Australia. One night they were walking the beach and found a broken surfboard and something covered in little crabs. It was an arm sheared off at the elbow. Another victim of the rare coastal drop bar. I was closing with a new co-worker at a small Mexican restaurant during my last semester of undergraduate school. He was a few years older, handsome, aloof, and had a terrible tattoo of a sword on his bicep about 3 inches long. It looked like he did it himself. I had asked about it earlier. He didn't answer me. Towards the end of close, he took 2 beers out of the cooler I had just restocked and asked me sit. I sat across from him at a booth and drank the beer he offered as he started to tell me about the sword tattoo. It was a machete, not a sword. A few years back, He and his twin brother had been at a house party. He didn't know many of the people there, but the woman who owned the place was putting the full court press on him, throwing herself at him. He wasn't particularly interested, but figured easy sex. Why not? He had been drinking, then exerted himself and fell asleep next to the young woman who owned the place only to wake up to being hit and someone screaming. Still drunk, he could see a man standing over him. He was screaming and the woman was screaming. The man was hitting him with something wet. Why was it wet? Quickly, he realized that the wet thing was a machete and that it was wet because there was blood everywhere. He was being murdered for being in bed with this guy's wife. My co-worker rolled out of bed and made it out of the garage door completely naked and covered in defensive wounds. He was able to get the next door neighbor to open her door before the man caught up with him. He was in the hospital for several weeks. As I was listening to this story, I started to analyze my co-worker's collarbone and forearms. There were long scars in several places. A few looked like burns, and I guess that's what I had figured them for before I knew. It was around 1 o'clock when we got up from the table, completely shocked and creeped out by what I had just been told. I then needed to walk about 300 yards to my car. He walked me, silently. I was grateful. That's gotta be one of the worst ways to be woken up. I worked in a New Jersey liquor store that was open later than most because we were attached to a bar. At 1:45 a.m. a really creepy guy, like picture a pedophile in your head and that's what he looked like, came in to get a $2.34 bottle of vodka. When he went to pay he pulled out around $1,000 in cash and smiled at me. Want some, he asked, and I said no. He didn't stop smiling at me and said he'd be in the parking lot if I changed my mind. That night I walked to my car with the problem solver, Louisville Slugger, kept under the register. Ended up running into him while delivering a pizza later that year. He was shirtless and living at a motel and came out to ask me if he could help me find the room I was looking for. I'm glad there's now 3,000 miles between us. Telling ghost stories and accounts of sightings during an overnight shift at a residential program home. A client supposedly died in the laundry room. Not really night shift, but it happened at 3 a.m. so it should suffice. I used to work at a private resort in Bali. If you know Bali, well, that island is really magical, as if every inch of the land is permeated with both something creepy and something calming, in perfect balance. So one day, I had to go to work at 3 a.m. because there was a guest who wanted to do sunrise fishing tour and he wanted me to be the guide. I came to my office to change clothes and put my bag. Now, this office building is located separate from the resorts. We had to walk for about 300 meters from the lobby, through a cobblestone path flanked by big, old trees, and past the resort's big Hindu temple. The building was 2-story and the long corridor was overlooking the vast land which the management let be filled with trees, because the resort was built upon Tanneradats and parts of it had to be empty. At 3 a.m. it was really dark and nobody was there. Only a single security guard who was stationed near the parking lot and definitely not in the building. I clocked in the fingerprint machine that happened to be located next to my office front door and got into my chair. As soon as I sat down, I heard the machine saying repeat again, which happened when someone whose fingerprint is not recorded in try to clock in. It didn't stop after a minute, so I got curious and opened the door. Silence. Nobody was there, only darkness and the swaying of leaves. I closed the door again, but the same thing repeated. As soon as I put my butt on my chair, the machine screamed repeat again. After the third time I was both scared and annoyed, so I opened the door loudly and shouted, "Stop playing around. I'm trying to work here." No more disturbance happened until the time to go. I refused to have another sunrise tour after that. RN here. Worked in a CCU. Each bed had a monitor which was also hooked up to a central monitor at our desk. More than once we got a rhythm appear on our screen from an empty room and the monitor in that room was always switched off when it happened. Always the same room. It was the one closest to the desk. So it was the room we put the sickest peoples in and thus it was the room that had the most deaths. We had a truck driver kill himself in the parking lot, slit his wrists and ankles, then changed his mind and ran into the warehouse looking for help. That happened on the night shift at 4 a.m. I came into work at 8 a.m. There was still a few cop cars left, but no ambulance or anything. Some cleaning had been done. but I learned that you don't really get blood out of concrete. You could see the trails in circles and how frantic he was looking for someone. It's sort of a repressed memory. Makes me shiver thinking of it. What a sad situation that was for him. It was pretty creepy going into that corner of the building on my next night shift. As creepy as I felt the building was, I hope he and his family have found peace. I really don't have words beyond that. Not myself this time, but my close relative worked as a maintenance guy in a hospital. He said the thing he will never forget is when he was testing some electrical switches. Some context. There were no patients in that area as it was refurbished prior, painting walls and all that, but he had to check the electricity there. The area was accessible though. He used his flashlight in the dark hallway and saw a woman in a nightgown with a bloody mouth who said, "Oh, I'm lost." He admitted he peed himself. Lady went to the wrong hallway. I'm an atheist and I don't believe in ghosts. Didn't stop me and both my co-workers one night shift all seeing the same 8-foot tall solid black shadow freaking drifting down the middle of the corridor. I slept with the lights on for weeks. I used to work overnight in a supermarket. One night while all three of us were working on the BWS aisle we heard someone running down the bread aisle. We all sort of looked at each other, went to check it out and found no one there but loads of product on the floor, almost as if someone had just swept it off the shelves. The manager went to check the cameras and saw nothing but the stock fall off, but it fell off section by section, not all at once. A few nights later I went to the staff room to grab a drink, all was fine. I went back out, but before I got to my co-workers I realized I left my phone in the staff room, so went back to get it. Every single colleague locker was open. I'm talking like 30 lockers wide open. I'm 90% sure they wasn't open when I first went and thought it was odd and quickly closed them all and headed back to work. I told the others who wanted to check it out and again check CCTV as they should be locked as they have personal belongings in. When we get back in, a few of them have been opened back up. Not all but some, and again nothing on the cameras to suggest anyone other than me had been in and out of the staff area in that time. Now I don't believe in ghosts or anything like that, and I am sure there is a reasonable explanation, but crap is whack. CT Tech here. Our pediatric scanner is in an older part of the hospital that used to house our trauma rooms. Being the only level 1 facility in the area, those rooms have seen a lot of deaths. On overnights we cover that scanner with techs from the adulter, which means we almost always go down there by ourselves for short periods. Everyone who works overnights has a story or two about weird things that happen down there. Sounds of doors opening and closing, and people talking. Never anyone there. We have monitors that show the hallways and there's never anyone where the voices are coming from. My story is I had just finished scanning my patient and a UA was bringing them back to their room. I was finishing the paperwork with my back to the door. I heard it open and assumed a doctor had come in to check the images. Saw a shadow in the reflection of a window and thought totally someone in the room with me. I took a second to finish my paperwork and when I turned around there was no one there. The door never reopened. Checked the monitors. No one in the hallway. Just to double check for myself I walked out into the hallway, was out of the room for less than a minute, and when I came back in someone thing had turned off all the lights in both the control room and the room with the scanner. Quickly grabbed my stuff, said goodnight to whatever was there and went back to the adult scan room. He was just helping you out. Nice of you to wish him a good night though. I work night audit in an extended stay hotel that mostly caters to business people and displaced families, so nothing too crazy ever happened, and I've only been creeped out once. At around 4ish am I had to use the bathroom, and to get to the employee bathroom you had to go through the kitchen. I opened the kitchen door and walk a few feet in total darkness. All of our lights are motion activated and the kitchen sensors sometimes don't work right away. This can usually be fixed by flailing around as you walk around, hoping you don't smack your hand on a cabinet. As I entered the pitch black of the kitchen I could sense something in here with me. Feet away. I froze. Every sense I had screaming at me that I wasn't alone. I've passed through this kitchen several times a night every night for a few years, sometimes in pitch blackness, and never felt off in any way. I could just feel the presence of something in the kitchen hallway, completely hidden from sight. The thing shifting in darkness beyond whatever qualified as sight in that space. I couldn't bring myself to start waving around to try and trigger the light sensors, and I couldn't bring myself to take another step in fear of running into whatever's in here with me. I slowly backed out, pushed the door open with my back, and stepped out into the dining area. As the lights of the dining area briefly illuminated the kitchen, I saw nothing, though there were plenty of blind spots that the thing in the kitchen could have slinked away to. I've worked night shifts for years and I had never had an experience like that and haven't since. Working late nights, you usually get sort of desensitized to weird nonsense going on, like situations that would rattle the day shift workers. To me it's like, oh, must be a Wednesday. I've looked back on this event and I keep asking myself why I didn't just go back in with my phone's flashlight on just to be sure we didn't have an intruder or inquisitive guest, but I simply couldn't at the time. I went back to my desk and tried convincing myself that it was absolutely nothing, which, to be clear, I'm nearly positive it was just that. But it would be one thing if I were the type to jump at my own shadow, but I'm not. This one time, out of nowhere, all my instincts told me I wasn't alone in that kitchen and that I shouldn't push ahead. Needless to say, I used the public guest bathroom for a few weeks, which was a horror story in its own right. Weird, I was just thinking of this story last night. Anyways, I worked at a hotel when I was in my early 20s. It was a brand new hotel in a small town that was heavy on tourism in the summer. In the winter, however, it was dead. We'd get people on business here and there, but there were some nights where we literally had like 5 rooms out of 200 rented out. I was covering the night shift for someone on one of those nights and it was so slow that I spent the majority of the time playing WoW on my laptop. Then at like 1230 am, this creepy looking dude strolls in. I offer to help him but he's just ignoring me and talking to himself as he looks around the lobby. He was looking at every corner and nodding and mumbling to himself. Finally I walked around the counter and went right up to him to see what I could do for him. He then said a whole bunch of nonsense about he used to own this building. It was just built a few months earlier, and eventually asked me for a book of matches. I explained to him that we didn't have any of those and he got super upset and started bitching about how his hotel always had matches. I was trying to get him to leave, so I went and took a lighter out of the lost and found and gave it to him. He continued to mumble and crap and then lit up a cigarette right in the lobby. I told him he couldn't do that. Pretty sure the dude was on drugs or whatever, and after a few minutes he agreed to go outside. He then stood directly in front of the lobby entrance and smoked while staring at me. At this point I felt very uncomfortable and had my cell phone and the hotel phone ready to call the police. When he finally finished his cigarette, he flicked it at the door and walked away. I shrugged it off and figured that was the end of it. A couple hours later, I was doing my rounds to check the exits and pool and such. Well, lo and behold, Mr. Smoker was standing at one of the side entrances smoking and again, just staring into the building. I told him he had to leave if he wasn't a guest and the guy didn't say a word, flicked his cigarette butt at me and walked away. As he was walking away I told him if I saw him again I'm going to report him for trespassing. A couple hours later, it was like 4-5 am now, I once again saw this freaking guy standing right outside the entrance. Before I confronted him, I called the cops. They said they were 3 minutes away. I walked out and told him the cops were coming. He flicked his stupid cigarette at me yet again and then told me to tell Mr. Walker that he was looking for him. No one in the hotel had that last name, guest or employee, so I still have no idea what he was talking about, and he somehow managed to avoid the police before they got there. I never saw him again, but that crap still creeps me out to this day. I worked third shift at a hospital in the supply department with a morgue across the hall. I heard the housekeeping supervisor tell this guy named Jean to clean the morgue. I could see Jean blanch. I casually walked back into my depth, then ran to the back, through the freight elevator, doors on both sides, and down another little hall and into the morgue. I turned off the light and stood against the wall with my hand backed onto the switch. 3 or 4 minutes later the door creaked open slowly and a hand reached in to find the switch. I closed my fingers over Jean's and heard Ina and his feet pounding away down the hall. I walked out and down the hall and he was leaned over trying to get his breath back. He swore vengeance but never did take it. I was the creepy thing that night. Oh my Christ, you little prick. I'd have been so livid with you, but also impressed. I guess I might count as I worked overnight at Walgreens for a while. Worked there for years though. Our store was said to be haunted and it got creepy sometimes. One time I was talking to my manager. We always had one cashier and one manager and one pharmacist on shift at night. And I was in one aisle and she was on the other side and we were having a conversation. All of a sudden I hear her over the intercom. From our stock room, which is probably at least 100 feet away through 2 keypad doors. No one was in the store but me, her, and the pharmacist. She had been back there cashing out damaged items for the last 20 minutes. It wasn't the pharmacist as they don't come out of the back, but even if they did, the pharmacist on duty was a man with an Indian accent and my manager is a 25ish old woman. Stuff falling off the shelves, which only ever happens at night, and seeing shadows were the other stuff. I also wasn't the only one that experienced that conversation thing. For a few years I worked the graveyard shift at a 24-hour CVS pharmacy. During Halloween one year I was the main cashier. Some dude walks in dressed as the Grim Reaper. His costume was of very high quality. Black robe made of shimmering velvet. Black mask made of a silky material that gave it a flowing appearance. And his scythe blade was probably made out of folded tinfoil. A senior citizen came out from one of the front aisles and saw death staring at him. The old man let out a very frightening gasp, clutched his chest, started trembling wildly, fell back and passed out. Someone screamed and a bunch of other people rushed to the front and all the religious people scattered like rats. It was probably creepy AF for them, but I had to excuse myself to go to the office and call an ambulance because I could not contain my laughter even though the old man might have been dead and I could not ask death to leave. If you are new to the channel, you can subscribe. I publish new videos every day. Until then, check another video. Bye for now.